हरे कृष्ण हरे कृष्ण। जय राधा माधव कुंज विहारी, जय राधा माधव कुंज विहारी, गोपी जनवल्लभा गिरिवरधारी, गोपी जनवल्लभा गिरिवरधारी, यशोदनंदन व्रजजनरंजन, यशोदानंदन व्रजजनरंजन, यशोदानंदन व्रजजनरंजन, यमुनातिरावनचारी, यमुनातिरावनचारी, जय राधा माधव कुंज विहारी, गोपी जनवल्लभा गिरिवरधारी, यशोदनंदन व्रजजनरंजन, यमुनातिरावनचारी, जय राधा माधव कुंज विहारी, जय राधा माधव कुंज विहारी, ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय, ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय, ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय, नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं, देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत्। नष्टप्रायेषु भद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया, भगवतीरुत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी। कृष्णाय वासुदेवाय देवकीनन्दनाय च नन्दगोपकुमाराय गोविन्दाय नमो नमः। Hare Krishna. So today we are reading from the second canto, 10th chapter, titled Bhagavatam is the answer to all questions. Verse number 34. Ata param sokshmatamam avyaktam nirvisheshanam anadimadya nidanam nityam vanmanasapparam अतः परं सूक्ष्मतमम् अव्यक्तं निर्विशेषणम् अनादिमध्यनिधनं नित्यं वान्मनसः परम् अतः परं सूक्ष्मतमम् अव्यक्तं निर्विशेषणम् अनादिमध्यनिधनं नित्यं वान्मनसः परम् अतः परं सूक्ष्मतमम् अव्यक्तं निर्विशेषणम् अनादिमध्यनिधनं नित्यं वान्मनसः परम् अतः परं सूक्ष्मतमम् अव्यक्तं निर्विशेषणम् अनादिमध्यनिधनं नित्यं वान्मनसः परम्. Mataji's word to word meaning. Ataha, therefore. Param, transcendental. Sukshmatamam, finer than the finest. Avyaktam, unmanifested. Nirvisheshanam, without material features. Anadi, without beginning. Madhya, without an intermediate stage. Nidhanam, without end. Nityam, eternal. Vak, words. Manasaha, of the mind. Param, transcendental. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Therefore, beyond this gross manifestation is a transcendental manifestation, finer than the finest form. It has no beginning, no intermediate stage, and no end. Therefore, it is beyond the limits of expression or mental speculation and is distinct from the material conception. Purport. The gross external body of the Supreme is manifested at certain intervals, and thus the external features or form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is not the eternal form of the Lord, which has no beginning, no intermediate stage, and no end. Anything which has a beginning, interim, and end is called material. The material world is begun from the Lord, and thus the form of the Lord before the beginning of the material world is certainly transcendental to the finest or finer material conception. The ether in the material world is considered to be the finest. Finer than the ether is mind, intelligence, and false ego. But all 8 of the outward coverings are explained as outer coverings of the absolute truth. The absolute truth is therefore beyond the expression and speculation of the material conception. He is certainly transcendental to all material conceptions. This is called Nirvisheshanam. One should not, however, misunderstand Nirvisheshanam as being without any transcendental qualifications. Visheshanam means qualities, therefore Nir added to it means that he has no material qualities or variegatedness. This nullifying expression is described in 4 transcendental qualifications, namely unmanifested, transcendental, eternal, and beyond the conception of mind or word. Beyond the limits of words means negation of the material conception. Unless one is transcendentally situated, it is not possible to know the transcendental form of the Lord. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupak Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vantaneham Shri Guroho Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam सहगणा रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनासहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्णपादान् सहगणा ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च हे कृष्णा करुणा सिन्धो दीनबन्धो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कान्ता राधा कान्ता नमोऽस्तुते तप्त काञ्चन गौराङ्गी राधे वृन्दावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभो नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासदि गौर भक्तवृंद हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्ण। So we have been discussing from the 10th chapter of the second canto. We are almost inching towards the completion of the second canto. The last few verses left, and currently we are discussing the description of the universal form, which in this very second canto is occurring for the third time. So Ras Gopal Prabhu was discussing the various descriptions of the universal form, and how even though it is the description of the same universal form, but the purpose of that description is different. I'll just add a few more additional points to it. So the first description of the universal form, it came in the very first chapter. The purpose of that, so the description is something like Patalam etasya hi padamulam patanti parshni prapade rasatalam mahatalam vishva srujota gulfau talatalam vai purushasya jange. So where is the Patala are his soles, Rasatala are his heels, Mahatala is his ankles, Talatala is his calves, like that. You know how the 14 planetary systems, the various Varnas, Ashramas, how they occupy various parts of the body of the Virat Purusha is described. So the prime purpose of this description in the first chapter was to establish what is the right object of meditation for a particular class of yogis. So they are the Virat Roop meditating yogis. Even though the Virat Roop is an imaginary form, there is a proper way of imagining that Virat Purusha, and that description is given in the first chapter. So the purpose is to establish the Dharanashraya, or the object of meditation of the particular type of yogis. That was the first description of the Virat Roop, and that was the purpose. The second description of the Virat Roop came in the 6th chapter of the second canto, Purusha Sukta confirmed. So in that particular description, even though it is a description of the same Virat Purusha, but if you see the nature of the description, it is slightly different. What is described is not different, but the way it is described is different because it has a different purpose. So if you see in that particular chapter, the description of the Virat Purusha comes like this. You know, from the subtle nose of Garbhodaka Sai Vishnu, the element earth is formed, and the Tanmatra smell is formed in the Virat Purusha. And from Garbhodaka Sai Vishnu's gross nose, Nasika, the sense Devata Ashwini Kumaras are formed, and the subtle sense organ Ghrana is formed in the Virat Purusha, like that. So like that the description continues. The purpose is to show that even though material energy is said to be the cause of this material universe, but ultimately the ultimate cause of the material universe is the Supreme Lord only. It is not material energy, as Srila Prabhupada calls Ajagalasthana Nyaya. So, use, oh sorry, not Ajagalasthana Nyaya. He talks about the Nyaya of, scorpions coming out of bag of rice. Vrishchika Tandula Nyaya. Yeah, Vrishchika is scorpion, Tandula is rice. Okay. So even though you see that Vrishchikas or sometimes scorpions come out of, today's day and age it doesn't happen because we purchase very small quantities of rice, and which gets consumed very fast. But these are the days when there were silos, where huge silos where for months together, for the whole year, rice used to be stored. Definitely scorpions would come. So that Vrishchika Tandula Nyaya. So, but rice is not the ultimate cause of the scorpions. The scorpions are coming through the rice, from the rice, and not the source of the scorpion is not, rice itself. Some other mother scorpion went and laid some eggs. They hatched in the rice and came out. So similarly, just to show that even though oftentimes the material energy is said to be the cause of this material world, but the ultimate cause of the material world is not material energy, but it is the Supreme Lord himself. So the Supreme Lord there is described to have a gross body, a subtle body, and from the gross body of Garbhodaka Sai Vishnu, some material elements are formed. From the subtle body of Garbhodaka Sai Vishnu, some other elements are formed like that. So this gives a very finer understanding of spirit. So just like matter has gross and subtle, similarly, spirit also is not homogeneous. Spirit also has variety in all forms. It also has variety in the form of gross and subtle also. Okay. So, this is described by Akrura also in one of his prayers in the 10th canto, where he talks about Bhu, earth, Toyam, water, Agni, fire, Pavanam, air, Kham, ether, etc. He says, Te Angabhutaha, he says, addressing Krishna, he says, they all are born from your body. Okay. So, therefore, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti writes here that even though speech and fire, etc., they all arise from actually the material energy, they are still said to arise from the mouth of the Supreme Lord or the nose of the Supreme Lord, because they are considered to be the vibhutis of the various limbs such as mouth. So vibhutis are just like you see your own reflection in a concave mirror or a convex mirror. It's a perverted reflection. Okay. So similarly, the vibhutis are, and the reflection is different in qualities. It has some similarities, but it is different in qualities with respect to the object which it's reflecting. So, the reflected object. Okay. So similarly, the Supreme Lord has a spiritual body, but his reflected vibhutis are material, their qualities are different, even though there are some similarities. So, in the spiritual world also, there is earth, water, fire, air, ether, and all these elements. But they are all conscious, they are all spiritual, they are not material. There is one of the Upanishads which is called as Panchopanishad. In that, the earth, water, fire, air, and ether in the spiritual world is described. The spiritual ether is called as Parameshti in the spiritual world. So it is spiritual, but it is the ether. The spiritual air is called as Puman. In the spiritual world, fire is called as Vishwa. Water is called as Nivritti. And earth is called as Sarva. So, those are the original. What we see here as earth, water, fire, air, ether are the perverted reflections of that. So, just like when we stand in front of the mirror, we are the source of our reflection, even though the reflection has significantly different qualities. Similarly, the Supreme Lord is the source of the material vibhutis, even though the nature of the vibhutis is significantly different from his own bodily parts. Okay. So that is why he reflects through the agency of material energy, which is his Bahiranga Shakti and not Antaranga Shakti. So therefore, even though he is the source, ultimately is the source of the material vibhutis, but his own body is not made of those material vibhutis. Okay. So oftentimes, because of the non-difference between the Shakti and the Shaktiman Purusha, therefore whatever is accomplished by the Shakti is ascribed to the Shaktiman Purusha. Or whatever is ultimately accomplished by the Shaktiman Purusha is sometimes seemed to be ascribed to the Shakti. Seemingly in an absolute sense, but we should understand that it is not in an absolute sense. Okay. So we see in the second canto, 10th chapter, we will see one of the later verses. Shukadeva Goswami says, Nasya karmani janmadau parasyanu vidiyate kartritva pratishedartam mayaya aropitam hittat. It is mentioned that na asya karmani janma adau. The creation, maintenance and destruction of this material world is not at all carried out by the Supreme Lord directly. Na asya karmani. Okay. Parasya kartritva. His direct involvement is pratishedartham. It is definitely denied in the scriptures, if you see the scriptures properly. Mayaya aropitam hitat. Whatever is performed actually by Maya is oftentimes ascribed to the Supreme Lord. Why? Because otherwise people will think that Maya is independently creating, independently maintaining, independently destroying. So in order to disprove that fact, whatever is performed by Maya is oftentimes ascribed to the Supreme Lord, so that one does not think that Maya is an independent creator. So that is the purpose of the second description of the universal form. In the 6th chapter of the second canto, the purpose is to show that how the Supreme Lord is both the material cause and the effective cause of this universe. Now in this 10th chapter, there is the third description of the universal form. The purpose of this description is to show that how the living entities in this world develop their gross and subtle bodies according to their desires. Okay. So it is desires which shape one's gross and subtle body. Okay. So therefore, you will see in this particular chapter, even though it is a description of the same universal form, but the description goes something like this. And then the universal form desired to speak. Then the gross mouth formed. Then the tongue formed. Then the subtle speech organ, jihva, formed there. And then the sense devata for speech, Agni, manifested there. And then the tanmatra of speech manifested, like that. Okay. Even though it's the same description, but the description goes like this. Then the universal form desired. So now what is this universal form? The universal form is just a conglomerate of all the jivas, that's all. So the universal form desired means that the jivas within that universe desired. Okay, like that. But all said and done, this Virat Roop is only material. It is not spiritual, which is very clearly mentioned. So the 33rd verse, yesterday's verse mentioned, Etad Bhagavato Rupam Stulam Te Vyahritam Maya Mahi Adibis Cha Avaranair Ashtabir Bahiravritam. It describes about the gross form of this material universe, which is made of the 14 planetary systems and covered by 8 layers. Earth, water, fire, air, ether. Then there is the layer of Ahankar, the layer of Mahat Tattva, and then the layer of Pradhan. These 8 layers. Today's verse says, Ataha Param Sukshmatamam. Okay. Much more subtler than this, Avyaktam Nirvisheshanam, Anadi Madhya Nidanam, Nityam Vang Manasap Param. In this way, it describes the subtle form of the material universe. Just like we have our subtle body, the universal form also has its subtle body. In tomorrow's verse, I'm not going to speak on tomorrow's verse, but I will just mention. In tomorrow's verse, it says, Amuni Bhagavad Rupe Maya Tehi Anuvarnite Ube Api Na Grinanti Maya Srishte Vipaschitaha. So, he says, Amuni Bhagavad Rupe Ube. These two forms of the Supreme Lord mentioned in the last two verses. Vipaschitaha na grinanti. Intelligent people do not accept it as an object of worship. Why? Maya srishte, because they are creations of Maya. They are not spiritual. It is clearly a manifestation of Maya. Okay. So the wise do not accept these two forms as objects of worship. Okay. So Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti says here, they accept the forms of Rama, Krishna, Narasimha, made of Shuddha Sattva in the stages of sadhana and in the stage of perfection. So at no stage, practitioners of pure devotional service worship this Virat Purusha. It is meant for those who lack sufficient Sukriti, where they can perceive and worship spiritual forms. Like that. So now, we often hear that this Virat Roop is an imaginary form. So, is it really mentioned in the Shastras? If yes, then how is it an imaginary form? Okay. So, in the 5th chapter of the 2nd canto, it is mentioned, Yasya iha avayavair lokan kalpayanti manishinaha. So, now kalpayanti means to imagine. Within the universe, the wise imagine the planets as his limbs. So there is no real Purusha who possesses, Patala as his souls and the various planetary systems as the various bodily parts. There is no real Purusha. It is an imagination. This keeps repeating again and again. Okay. So the Acharyas say, within the universe is the Purusha made of the planets whose limbs the wise imagine to be the planets. The planets are not really his limbs. Okay. Again, in the 5th chapter later, it's mentioned, Bhurloka kalpita padbyam bhuvarlokosya nabitaha hrida swarloka urasa maharloko mahatmanaha. Again, the word kalpita comes. 2538. Kalpita again means imagine. And finally, he says, Itiva loka kalpana, he says. Bhurloka kalpita padyam bhuvarlokosya nabitaha swarloka kalpito murdna itiva loka kalpana. Again and again he says kalpita, kalpana, he says. Means imagination. Okay. So now, in Srila Jiva Goswami, in his commentary to Brahma Samhita, in one of the verses he mentions that sometimes in the scriptures, so he's talking about sometimes Lord Shiva and Parvati Devi are considered to be the cause of this world in some of the scriptures. Jagata Pitarau Vande Parvati Parameshwarau, like that it is mentioned. So now why it is mentioned like that? He is giving an analogy to explain this. And in that analogy, he gives the analogy of Virat Purusha. He says, sometimes in the scriptures, they here refers to Lord Shiva and Mother Parvati, are described as such in a figurative way, in which they are the particular limbs of the Purusha, similar to the Lord being described as the figurative universal form. So the universal form is figurative. There is no literal Purusha. Okay. So now, as the other day Hari Parshad Prabhu was describing, that the universal form is imaginary, which means it has to be imagined. There is no literal Purusha who possesses that. But what it represents, it's not imaginary. Okay. The universe is real. It's not that Jagat is not Mithya, as the Mayavadis claim. The Jagat is real, but to think that the various aspects of the Jagat to constitute the various limbs of the bodies of one Purusha, that is an imagination. There is no real Purusha like that. Okay. So just like sometimes we have a map, a map of India, map of Australia, the world map, in which you identify various states, various countries. Okay, it's you are imagining it. You are imagining this to be India. You are imagining this to be Australia, like that. But in reality, that is not India, that is not Australia. It's just an imagination, like that. So now that we have discussed the various descriptions of Virat Purusha in Srimad Bhagavatam, now there is a universal form described in Bhagavad Gita also. So what is that description? Is it the same? Because the same name universal form is used. So is it the same or is it different? We will quickly take a look at that. Towards the end of the 10th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna, after describing all his vibhutis, material vibhutis, he says, Atava bahunaitena kim gyatena tavarjuna vishtabhyahamidam kritsnam ekamshena stito jagat. Okay. He says, what is the use of knowing all these individual vibhutis, O Arjuna? Please understand, just by one portion of myself, I am firmly established in this universe. Okay. So, in the 11th, so 10th chapter ends there. So 11th chapter begins with Arjuna requesting Krishna to show that form in which he pervades. Okay. So Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti in his commentary, he says, at the end of the last chapter, hearing about one amsha of his dear friend Krishna, Ekamshena Stito Jagat, with the words Vishtabhyaham idam kritsnam ekamshena stito jagat, Arjuna became submerged in the highest bliss and desired to see that form. What is that form? We are going to see what is that form. Okay. So Arjuna says in the 3rd verse, Drashtumichami te rupam aishwaram purushottama. O Purushottama, I desire to see that powerful form of yours. What is that powerful form? Krishna responds to this request. Krishna says, Pashyame partha rupani shatasho ata sahasrashah nana vidani divyani nana varna akritini cha. He says, O Partha, see my hundreds and thousands of wonderful forms of various types, of various colors and various shapes. Okay. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti in his commentary says, please hear carefully. First, I will show him that form described in the Purusha Sukta as Sahasra Shirisha Purushaha Sahasraksha Sahasrapat. So what is this form? Purusha Sukta describes which form? Virat Purusha, right? See what he writes. That form with 1,000 heads, 1,000 eyes and 1,000 feet. He says, it is my own expansion, the first Purusha Mahavishnu. So the form showed to Arjuna on the battlefield was not Virat Purusha. It was the form of Mahavishnu. We will see this again and again repeating, you'll see. Okay. It is my own expansion, the first Purusha avatar, Mahavishnu. Later, by having the necessary qualification, I will show him the form of time, he says. Considering in this way in his mind, the Lord faced Arjuna, telling him to pay attention. Please see, Pashya. Even though he was already seeing, but he wanted to show something which is going to astonish Arjuna. So he says, Pashya, Pashya, just watch. Okay. He says, in my one form, my Swarupa, see hundreds of my Swarupas, which are my Vibhutis. Okay. In my one form, which is the form of Mahavishnu, because where do all the universes come from? The bodily pores of Mahavishnu, right? So in my one form, see hundreds of Swarupas. Those hundreds of Swarupas are the individual universes, which are there in the bodily pores, right? Next verse, 7th verse, he says, Iha ekastam jagat kritsnam pashya adyacha saracharam. Mama dehe gudakesha yacha anyad drashtum ichasi. A very interesting verse. Please hear carefully. Now, in this place, see in one part of my body this whole universe. This is a very interesting point that he says. In one part of my body, the whole universe. What is Virat Purusha? Virat Purusha is the whole universe as the Purusha. But Krishna is not showing that. If he was showing that, he would have told, see the whole universe as my body. He did not say that. He said, look at the whole universe in one part of my body. Iha ekastam jagat kritsnam. Okay. So this Virat Roop is universe as the Purusha. Okay. But the form that Krishna was showing to Arjuna on the battlefield is Purusha holding the universes in the form of Mahavishnu. It is not Virat Roop, it is Vishwarupa. Virat Roop is absolutely material and it is just an imaginary form. The form that he was showing on the battlefield is not an imaginary form. It is a real form of Mahavishnu. Okay. We saw in this chapter that very clearly it is mentioned that Virat Purusha is material. Okay. We will see. So Virat Purusha, what is this conception of Virat Purusha? Imagining the energies to be the Purusha. The Jiva Shakti and the material energy. Imagining it to be a Purusha. That is Virat Purusha. Imagining the energies to be the Purusha. But Vishwarupa is the energetic Purusha himself. It is not imagining the energies to be the Purusha. It is the possessor of that energy, the source of that energy. Okay, that is what he was showing. And then in the next verse he says, actually, Natumam shakyase drashtum anenaiva swachakshusha divyam dadami te chakshuhu pashyame yogamaishwaram. So here he says, you will not be able to see this form with material eyes. Of course, Arjuna does not have material eyes. Okay, this is a general principle that Krishna is mentioning. One will not be able to see it with material eyes. So let me give you Divya Chakshu to see this Yogam Aishwaram, Pashyame Yogam Aishwaram. That is translated by the Acharyas as majestic form, not material form. Virat Roop is material. He says majestic form. Okay. In the purport or commentary, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti says, see that universe and whatever else you desire to see in my body. He does not say, see the universe as my body. See the universe in my body, which means the universe is occupying a part of the body of Krishna in the form of Mahavishnu. Okay. So, Arjuna should not think that this is some form caused by magical trick or material illusion. For the purpose of giving him faith that the form which contains this whole universe, he does not say the form as the universe. The form which contains the whole universe is Satchid Ananda. We very clearly saw the Virat Purusha is not Satchid Ananda. Amuni Bhagavad Rupe Maya Tehi Anuvarnite Ube Apina Grinanti Maya Srishte Vipaschite. That is the next verse. Okay. Very clearly it is mentioned it is made of Maya. But here he says, he wanted to prove to Krishna that this form that I am showing you is not material, it is Satchidananda. Therefore he says, I will give you Divyam Dadamite Chakshuhu. Okay. So you cannot see my purely spiritual form. Again it is mentioned. Therefore I give you these divine eyes. So the Acharya says that because Arjuna is a personal associate of the Lord, Arjuna does not have material eyes like ordinary material persons. Okay. Then why should spiritual eyes be given to Arjuna who already possesses spiritual eyes only? The explanation that is given is, the eyes that Arjuna possesses, it is meant for relishing only the sweet form of Krishna, not the majestic form of Mahavishnu. Okay. So therefore, but on the other hand, it can be said that the superior eye, which sees only the great sweetness of Krishna's human pastimes, does not at all accept the glories of the Lord's pastimes performed with the Devatas. So the Mahavishnu is called as, the form is said to be as very attractive to the Devatas, those who do not have that desire to relish the sweet pastimes of the Supreme Lord. So that is called as Deva Leela. And the example that is given is one who has tasted the juice of white lotus. Okay, in the transcendental world there is white lotus, okay, whose juice is said to be really sweet. They cannot relish sugar candy with his tongue. So sugar candy pales into insignificance. So because you cannot call the transcendental form of Mahavishnu to be bitter, so it is called as sugar candy. If the transcendental form of Mahavishnu is sugar candy, then you cannot address Krishna's form to be sugar candy. So it is mentioned to be the juice of white lotus, which is said to be even more transcendently sweet. Thus the Lord, wanting to show the majestic nature of his pastimes with the Devatas, gave Arjuna non-human eyes suitable for seeing Deva Leela. Which is, okay. So again, in the little later, Krishna says, talking about this Vishwarupa, or the form that he was showing, he says, this is Arjuna speaking. He says, Tvam aksharam paramam veditavyam, tvamasya vishwasya param nidanam, he says. So he addresses this form of, the form that Krishna was showing as Vishwasya param nidanam, the shelter of everything within this universe, into which the universe goes and seeks shelter. Which is that form into which the universe goes and seeks shelter at the time of dissolution? The form of Mahavishnu. Okay. So, in this way, we see that the form shown, the form described in the second canto is Virat Rup, which is material, it is an imagination. The form shown to Arjuna on the battlefield is transcendental, it is the form of Mahavishnu holding the universes. Okay. So Virat Rup is imagining the energies to be the Purusha. But Vishwarup, that which he was showing, is the energetic Purusha himself. His body is transcendental, not material. Okay. The Virat Rup conception is universe as the Purusha, whereas the form shown to Arjuna is the Purusha holding the universes. Okay. This is the difference. So now, coming to the next topic, the question is, who is the Sahasra Shirsha Purusha described in the Purusha Sukta? Is it the Virat Rupa? Is it Mahavishnu? Or who is it? Okay. So we will touch this topic. So, we saw in the Bhagavad Gita beginning, we quoted in the first chapter, in the 11th chapter it is mentioned. First, Krishna says, first I will show him that form which is described in the Purusha Sukta as Sahasra Shirsha Purusha. And he says, it is my own expansion, Mahavishnu. He says that. Okay. And this is kind of confirmed in the second canto of chapter, where just before describing the Virat Purusha, it is mentioned, Saeva Purusha Tasmad Andam Nirbidya Nirgataha Sahasroru Angri Bahu Akshaha Sahasranana Shirshavan. Okay. Thereafter, that Purusha who has been described till now is Karanodakasai Vishnu, pierced the universe and went outside. There he resides with 1,000 legs, feet, arms, eyes, etc. Okay. So, this Purusha is the Antaryami of the totality of Jivas, it is mentioned. That is Karanodakasai Vishnu. Okay. His form without material gunas lying on the Karana ocean is described. So that Sahasra Shirsha Purusha is Karanodakasai Vishnu, but whose representation is the Virat Purusha. So this is confirmed in Brihad Bhagavatamrita also. In Narada Muni's journey, he is going through various places. He comes to Satyaloka where Brahmaji is staying. there it is mentioned that he saw Brahmaji's worshipable Lord, who is called as Sahasra Shirsha. His name is Sahasra Shirsha. He possesses that 1,000 heads, 1,000 arms, like that. And in the commentary, Srila Sanatana Goswami says that this form is the first incarnation Mahavishnu, like that. So now, is it Mahavishnu or is it Virat Purusha who is described here? Because the description itself seems to indicate many material parts. It is reconciled by Srila Jiva Goswami in his Brahma Samhita commentary again. So he says, just as one Purusha is glorified as the Lord and universe in the Purusha Sukta. So in Purusha Sukta, the Lord and the universe are glorified as Sahasra Shirsha Purusha. Okay. With the conception that the universe and the Paramatma dwelling within are non-different. Shakti and the Shaktiman Purusha are non-different. So that Sahasra Shirsha Purusha indicates both Karanodaka Sai Vishnu primarily and secondarily the universe also. That is how it is explained. Okay. So now, guess what? Actually, the Garbhodaka Sai Vishnu is also called as Sahasra Shirsha Purusha. This is there in Srimad Bhagavatam. So in the fourth canto, purport, there is a mention that the form Prishni Garbha who comes to give darshan to Dhruva Maharaj, it is said, he is called Sahasra Shirsha, which refers to Garbhodaka Sai Vishnu, he says. Because they are non-different, both being Vishnu. So now, how is Garbhodaka Sai Vishnu Sahasra Shirsha Purusha? For a different reason. It is mentioned that because he is the source of all the incarnations in this material world, from him comes all the Leela Avataras and the other Avataras. Therefore, because thousands of Avataras come from him, therefore he is also called as Sahasra Shirsha Purusha. And we know Kshirodaka Sai Vishnu, the Paramatma, he can also be technically called Sahasra Shirsha Purusha according to Bhagavad Gita. Sarvatah pani padam tat sarvatokshi shiromukam sarvatra shutimal loke sarvamavritya tishyati. Everywhere are his hands and feet, everything, because he is, as the Paramatma, he is there. Now, if you see, as the other day Hariparshad Prabhu was telling, Krishna also can be called as Sahasra Shirsha Purusha. There is nothing wrong in one sense. Okay. So, he gave the example of Krishna marrying 16,000 wives at one time. There is another pastime of Krishna eating lunch with all his cowherd boyfriends in the Vrindavan forest. So everyone is thinking that Krishna is looking at me. So what is the explanation? How is this possible? Are they imagining it? So here the Acharyas say, Krishna fulfilled their desire by employing his Sarva Sankalpata Shakti to make his face and limbs appear in all directions at once. Okay. So everyone was seeing Krishna. And it is mentioned, this pastime illustrates the Bhagavad Gita verse, Sarvataha pani padam tat sarvatokshi shiromukam sarvataha shrutimal loke sarvamavritya tishtati. Everywhere are his hands and legs, his eyes, heads and faces, and he has his ears everywhere. So in this way, it's a Krishna also is in one sense can be called as Sahasra Shirsha Purusha. And Hariparshad Prabhu was mentioning the other day that actually all the incarnations can be. Just that it is switch on, switch off. When needed, it can be switched on, not needed, switched off. Now, coming to the last theme which I had in my mind to discuss today. Why is there so much description of all this Virat Purusha, creation, all these things, especially in a literature like Srimad Bhagavatam, which is considered to be the Amala Puran, spotless Purana. Dharma Projita Kaitavotra Paramo Nirmat Saranam Satam. From the beginning only it rejects all kinds of Kaitava Dharma and everything speaks only about pure bhakti, or it is supposed to speak only about pure bhakti. Why all this description of Virat Purusha? Some yogi meditating on the Virat Purusha and all these things. Why? Okay. So we will see there could be unlimited reasons. We will discuss 5 reasons quickly. We are running short of time. Okay. So the first reason is that Srimad Bhagavatam, even though it is Paramahamsa Samhita, but it is not just meant for Paramahamsas. Okay. Contrary to popular belief, it's not just meant for Paramahamsas. In fact, the speakers and compilers of Bhagavatam never had the Paramahamsas in their mind when they compiled it. Now, how do we know? Let's see. Vyasadev compiling Srimad Bhagavatam. The purpose is given. Anartho pashamam sakshad bhakti yogam adokshaje lokasya janato vidvams chakre satvata samhitam. It is mentioned. Why did Vyasadev compile Srimad Bhagavatam? Anartha upashamam, the destruction of all these anarthas, sakshat bhakti yogam adokshaja, is possible only by the process of bhakti. But ajanato lokasya chakre satvata samhitam. Therefore, for the ignorant people who are struggling with their anarthas, Vyasadev compiled Srimad Bhagavatam. So, ajanato lokasya, they are not Paramahamsas. What about Shukadev Goswami? Yaswanubhavam akila shruti saramekam adhyatma deepam atititirshatam tamondam samsarinam karunayaha purana guhyam. Out of compassion towards the samsaris, those who are struggling in this material world, he compiled Purana Guhyam, the most secret of Puranas, Srimad Bhagavatam. The target audience when Shukadev Goswami spoke was not the Paramahamsas. Maitreya spoke Srimad Bhagavatam for whom? Soham nrinam shulla sukaya dukkam mahadgatanam viramaya tasya pravartaye Bhagavatam Puranam. For whom? People of this world, Shulla Sukhanam Mahad Dukkam. For meager material pleasures, they are undergoing deep distress. Tasya Viramaya, to put a full stop to this, Pravartaye Bhagavatam Puranam. He spoke Bhagavatam Puranam. For whom? For the materialistic people of this world, not for Paramahamsas. Narada Muni instructed Vyasadev to write. For whom? Pravartamanasya gunair anatmanas tato bhavan darshaya cheshtitam viboho. Narada Muni says. Gunair pravartamanasya. For those materialistic people who are completely pushed by the gunas. Bhavan darshaya cheshtitam viboho. You should describe the pastimes of the Supreme Lord in Srimad Bhagavatam, he says. And later he also says, Etadhi atura chittanam matra sparsha ichaya muhuhu bhavasindu plavo drishto haricharyanu varnanam. In the 6th chapter of 1st canto, he says that Etadhi atura chittanam, for those people who are completely filled with anxieties. Why? Matra sparsha ichaya, with a desire to bring their senses in touch with their sense objects and enjoy in this material world. For that purpose, people are always in anxiety. What is the best boat to help such people cross the ocean of material existence? Haricharyanu Varnanam. That is described in Srimad Bhagavatam. So, when Narada Muni instructed Vyasadev, he instructed him, his point of contention was, you have not written a book for the materialistic people to cross over the ocean of material existence. The Vedanta Sutra that you have written is good enough for Vichakshanas. Vichakshanosya rahati veditam vibhu. So the Vichakshanas can do it. What have you written for ordinary materialistic people? So Bhagavatam is not. So then why is Bhagavatam, if Bhagavatam everyone spoke for the ordinary materialistic people, why is Bhagavatam called as Paramahamsa Samhita, Amala Puran then? Because it brings everyone to the stage of Paramahamsa, whoever it may be. Syat Krishnanama Charitadi Sitapya Vidya Pittopatapta Rasanasya Narochikanu Kintu Adarad Anudinam Kalusaiva Jushta Swadvi Kramad Bhavati Tadgada Mulahantri. So, Krishna's Nama Rupa Guna Leela are sweet. But for a person whose tongue and other senses are coated with the bile of ignorance, they cannot taste it. Taste the sweetness. But Adarad Anudinam Kalusaiva Jushta. If they respectfully and regularly take shelter of Nama Rupa Guna Leela, Swadvi Kramat Bhavati. Gradually it will become tasty. So the Paramahamsas taste the actual taste of Srimad Bhagavatam, whereas for the other materialistic people, Bhavaushada Shrotra Manobhiramat. For the materialistic people, it is Bhavaushadi. It is the medicine which can help them transcend the material ocean. But for the Paramahamsas, it is Shrotra Manobhiramat. It gives great pleasure to the ears and heart, like that. So, Bhagavatam is not just for the Paramahamsas, it is for everyone. So, everyone has to be picked up from where they are. Now, the second reason is, different people have actually different qualifications. Okay. In the 11th canto, Krishna says, Nirvinnanam Jnana Yogo Nyasinam Iha Karmasu Teshu Anirvinna Chittanam Karma Yogastu Kaminam. What is the qualification for Jnana and Karma? He says, those who have become completely detached from this material world, they are qualified for Jnana. Teshu Anirvinna Chittanam. Those who have not become detached from this material world, those who are convinced that they have to enjoy in this material world, for them, they are qualified for Karma. Yadrichaya matkatadau jata shraddostu yappuman nanirvinno nati sakto bhakti yogosya siddhida. Okay. But those who are neither too attached like the karmis nor too detached like the jnanis, but have developed a genuine taste or faith in hearing Krishna Katha, they are qualified for bhakti. So, practically, Bhagavatam does not want to reject anyone. Bhagavatam wants to accommodate everyone, irrespective of whatever position they are in, and raise them to the level of being Paramahamsas. So, Bhagavatam talks about karma, little bit, jnana, and other things just to attract them, and so that eventually they can become Paramahamsas, like that. Now, the third reason why Bhagavatam talks about all these other different topics is a proper understanding of these topics actually leads to purification. In the second canto, Brahmaji tells to Narada Muni, Mayam varnayato amushya ishwarasyanu modatah shrinvata shraddaya nityam mayayatmana muyyati. So, he says that one who hears these descriptions of, the material world, the material creation of the material world, the performance of the Leela of the Supreme Lord with respect to this material universe, which is Purushavatara Leela, Maya Yatmana Muyyati, they will not be bewildered by Maya. And Srila Prabhupada writes a beautiful purport. I will read just some part of the purport because it's already getting late. So he says, the science of learning a subject matter seriously is different from the sentiments of fanatics, Prabhupada writes. Fanatics or fools may consider the Lord's activities in relation to the external energy to be useless. Okay? But they may be very eager to hear the 10th canto pastimes of Krishna holding the Govardhan hill and performing pastimes with gopis, etc. Prabhupada writes, the chief reciters of the Bhagavatam are very much enthusiastic about the Lord's internal potential activities, and the pseudo-devotees absorbed in material sense enjoyment falsely jump to the stage of liberated souls, and thus they fall down deeply into the clutches of external energy. Okay. So, so Prabhupada writes, topics like the Ras Leela are meant for the liberated souls and not for the conditioned souls. The conditioned souls, therefore, must hear with appreciation and devotion the Lord's pastimes in relationship with the external energy. Like that. And Prabhupada says, and such acts are as good as hearing of Rasa Leela in the liberated state. Okay. Like that. Anyways, so third reason. So first reason that we saw is it is not just meant for Paramahamsas. The second reason, There are people with different qualifications who may approach Bhagavatam. Bhagavatam should cater to everyone and pick them to the level of Paramamsas. The third reason is that proper understanding of these topics leads to purification, and later one will become. And not only will it lead to purification, actually listening to these topics is a prerequisite to hear the higher topics. This is the fourth reason. It's an actual prerequisite. Towards the end of the 5th canto, the last but one verse, Srila Shukadeva Goswami, having described the whole Vedic cosmology and the universe, he says, in the Bhagavatam early cantos, the universe divided into 14 parts is described as the gross body of the Supreme Lord. Okay. If one reads the description of the external form of the Lord with great faith, or if one hears about it or explains it to others and develops faith in bhakti, and pure intelligence, Shraddha, Bhakti, Vishuddha Buddhi, then what happens? Saha Veda Bhagavataha Paramatmano Upageyam. Then he will understand the topic of the Supreme Lord, higher topics, the topics of the Leela Avataras, which, like an Upanishad, is very difficult to understand. So Srila Shukadeva Goswami says, what is easy to understand is the description of the Virat Purusha, the description of the Purusha Avatar Katha, how the Garbhodaka Sai Vishnu, Karanodaka Sai Vishnu, etc., they are involved in the universal creation. This is easy to understand. What is very difficult to understand is the pastimes performed by Matsya, Kurma, Varaha, Narasimha, Ityadi, especially the form of Krishna. If one hears these pastimes with faith and devotion, then in future they will become qualified to hear those pastimes and understand it in the right sense. Okay. So there is a reason why these pastimes are there, and there is a reason why these pastimes are there early in Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay. And finally, the last reason why, there could be more reasons, the last reason that we will discuss is, any Mahapuran has to have these 10 topics. Atra Sargo Visargascha Sthanam Poshanamutayah Manvantaresha Anukata Nirodho Muktirashraya. So these 10 topics are needed, but in Bhagavatam the other 9 topics are used in such a way that it illuminates the glories of the 10th topic. Dashamasya Vishuddhyartam Navanamiha Lakshanam Varnayante Mahatmanaha Shrutena Artena Cha Anjasa. So like that. So for these 5 reasons, you have all these other topics which may seemingly not be why it is mentioned for, how am I going to develop love for Krishna by hearing these topics? We may not know, but the writers and speakers of Bhagavatam exactly know how it will happen. Just like a patient may not know how when I take a medicine, it is going to cure my disease, but the doctor exactly knows. Hare Krishna. Thank you all very much for your patient listening. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Hare Krishna. Thank you.